Yesterday, Sayadaw explained the basics of how to observe when sitting, but not yet completely. So today he will repeat so that the basics are more firm. When we practice Vipassana, there's a principle, a fixed principle, that at the moment of arising, at the moment the object arises, one needs to apply effort and aim, observe steadfastly. The object is what is to be observed. Our whole body is like a field of observation. And within this field of observation, it's as if you have small patches. For example, like on a farm, you have a large area of land, and you have different patches of land that are planted. So, too, in our body, there's a large field of observation, and there are small bits to be observed within that are ever arising newly. So there's seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing. In worldly terms, in conventional terms, rising, falling, sitting, standing, bending, stretching, leaning, lifting, moving, placing, opening, closing the eyes, blinking. These are our field of observation, and within the field of observation there are small objects, small things to be observed. And the things to be observed that appear are called the arising object. For example, when the rising arises, then one applies effort to get the mind to reach the object. And there also has to be aiming of the mind, which is called in Pali vitakka. This aiming has to be focused, and this vitakka is a jhanic quality. So there has to be the type of focused observation that there is with jhana. Every time an object arises to be observed, these two factors are very important. Applying mental energy to get the mind to the object, and aiming the mind. So every arising object, at that moment we should always apply effort and aiming. And we should think of this as our only job. The only thing we want to be concerned with is applying effort and aiming to observe the object that is arising, and nothing else should be our concern. So this is the first thing to bear in mind. When we apply mental energy to observe the object, this is in order to heat up the mind. It makes the mind warm, so that the mind is not cool or sluggish. Instead, it's alert, active. The mind always needs to be alert and active. So it's very good if the yogis apply effort. In other areas, it's needless to say this is true. If there's no aiming, then the mind naturally shrinks. It contracts. And it becomes cold, like cold butter. It becomes unworkable, unmalleable, the way butter is when it's cold. But if we apply heat to the mind, then there won't be this coldness coming in. The mind will be warm. With aiming, there will be no shrinking. The mind won't shrink. So with these two factors, the mind will be soft and malleable, workable. And this makes the mind agile. So we should understand this. When we apply mental effort, this gets the advantage over laziness. And so laziness can't enter the mind. With aiming, the mind that is shrunken and dull and sleepy is overcome. So we develop the power that is able to get the advantage over laziness. And this power also has its companion, which is aiming, which overcomes the shrunken mind. With these, no laziness or boredom can enter the mind. And this is very important. So the mind will be fresh and active and alert with these two factors. So when we sit, every rising, every falling, rising and falling, to observe these one after one, to make the effort to observe these one after another, has a benefit. And the present benefit is that intense laziness is overcome. And because aiming is present, there's no dull, sluggish sleepiness either. These are overcome. So, I'm sorry, I'm not finished, but I can't. This sluggishness, laziness, and sleepiness, this is the yogi's nearest enemy at the present moment. And it's very important to overcome it. When these two factors have good strength, then sati sticks to the object of observation. It falls on the object of observation. There's no need to develop sati deliberately. It automatically arises with the application of energy and aiming. And with this mind, when the mind containing sati becomes continuous, then there's what is called rekha varana. Rekha means that the factor of sati protects the mind from the defilements. Avarana, it's like the mind is blockaded. The door is closed so that the defilements can't come in. And because of that, the mind is secure. This is called goti in Pali. Because of good protection, there's security. No lobha can come into the mind, no greed. No anger can come into the mind. These defilements can't enter the mind because of the security established by sati. And when there's security, then there's freedom. Freedom from the oppression of the kilesas. This is called moti in Pali, or vimoti. If one is free, if the mind is free, then it's peaceful. There's peaceful happiness. So this automatically comes to the mind. Because sati sticks to the object of observation, because the mind is firmly established on the object, it doesn't run anywhere. It falls collectedly on the object. And this is samadhi, or concentration. If sati arises, then samadhi also arises. There's no need to create samadhi specially. And at this time, there's no separation of the mind from the object. The mind doesn't go anywhere else. And thus, there's no remorse over bad things one has done, or over good things that one didn't do. There's no regret, no chance for regret to arise. And these two, odicca and kokocha, restlessness and remorse, the scattering of the mind, and the mind which remembers the bad things and then feels regret. These two can't arise. Every time the mind falls collectedly on the object, these opposing factors are eliminated. So this is a type of purity, cleanliness that is obtained. If we analyze what is involved in one moment of observing in this way, it's very satisfying. There's the ardent energy or virya, which overcomes laziness. And it has the help of aiming, vitakka, which gives the mind more energy. Sati protects the mind from defilements. And if the mind falls collectedly on the object, if the mind is unified, then samadhi is there. And there's no scattered mind, no remorse. So every time one observes the rising, observes the falling with these factors, this is the benefit that is gained from the practice. Later on, a firm and guaranteed type of purity or cleanliness is guaranteed. And those who want cleanliness, who want purity, at first they need to start to develop this purity moment by moment by observing each object one after another. If we don't start to develop purity or cleanliness in this way, there won't be any lasting or firm type of cleanliness to come later on. It can't possibly arise without this initial work. When the mind which can observe the rising and falling is occurring, then lobha or greed does not arise. There's no wanting to see good things, hear good things, smell, taste, touch, think good things. This greed has no chance to arise, and therefore the mind is clean. The mind is free of fault because it's pure. And just as the mind is free of greed or lobha, so too dosa or anger cannot arise. The mind is free of anger. This mental attitude is good. It's free of fault. And this benefit comes from the practice. The mind that is free of greed and free of anger arises. So this type of practice or habit, is it a good one or a bad one to observe the mind, observe so that the mind is free of anger and free of greed? Is this type of practice clean or unclean? So we should think about this. The mind is clean and pure, and this is a good thing. This benefit is also gotten straight away in the practice. The yogis developed the clean mind because of walking according to the path of satipatthana. And as we walk this path of practice, at the present moment the mind is clean. And there's no wanting to harm others. One just walks along the path. This path that we walk is called ekayana. This means that there's just this path, and this path is a sure path. The Buddha gave this guarantee. At that moment, knowledge hasn't yet arisen, but the opposing factors, called the nivaranas, are being quelled. They're being pacified in the moment of noting. They die down. This is called samatha. First, there's the effort of pushing the mind to the object of observation, and the mind is firmly sticking to the object, that's sati. and the mind is unified, falling collectedly on the object. That's samadhi. So virya, effort, sati, mindfulness, and samadhi, concentration. When these three occur, then raga and dosa, or greed and anger, which oppose the wholesome mind, have no chance to occur. And it's said in Pali, Pachanika dhamme sametiti samato. Pachanika dhamma are the opposing factors, raga and dosa, which oppose the wholesome mind. These factors are being suppressed or calmed, and thus this type of practice is called samatha. So there always needs to be samatha, these factors that make up samatha in our practice. And if this is occurring, if there's 60 seconds in a minute, and every time we note once each second, then there's 60 occurrences of this samatha mind happening. And if we don't note every second, but every other second, still there's 30 times that this mind with samatha is occurring. So one can calculate how many moments this would be if we did it for half an hour. And this mind is called the bhavana mind, bhavana consciousness. This is called citta visuddhi, or purity of mind. This clean mind that contains virya, sati, and samadhi. This cleanliness of mind, purity of mind. The monks keep the sila of the monks, their own morality. Lay people keep the sila of lay people. And if we keep it so that it's not broken, then we have purity of sila, or purity of moral conduct. Sila visuddhi. And in this way our actions and our speech are pure. Because of observing the rising, the falling, and every arising object without missing, we have citta visuddhi, or purity of mind. So this is a further level of purity. Can it be denied that this type of purity arises? It's not possible. But one doesn't yet know the stiffness or tension or movement that are the nature of rising and falling. There are 3 levels on which we see things in our body. Form, called santana in Pali, manner, called akara, and true nature, sabhava. So at first the mind falls on the form. What we see has this concept of form mixed in. We can't see sabhava, or true nature, separately yet. Or we may see from time to time the rising, the expansion of the belly, the falling or collapsing of the abdomen. So sometimes the mind falls on this, which is called manner, the position or manner that the abdomen is in. And this is also not yet knowing true nature. This is knowing the manner or akara. Only when we know sabhava, or true nature, separately from concept, without concept, is it knowledge. So knowledge isn't arising yet. We can't say that this is the occurrence of jnana at this point. What is occurring is just samatha, and this is purity, the purity of mind. So we have to understand this. Although the yogis are practicing in order to observe the nature of mind and matter, or nama and rupa, at the start, the yogis aren't able to know these yet. If we want to know the true nature of mind and matter, nama and rupa, first of all, keep sila, so that it's not broken. And second of all, observe, applying effort and aiming so that samatha occurs. And when this clean mind becomes powerful, the clean mind that has virya, sati, and samadhi, then you are sure to see true nature, sabhava. When you see it, it's still mixed in with form. We're not able yet to separate out the true nature from the form. And sometimes sabhava is seen mixed in with the manner. One isn't able to see it separately yet. But if one wants to develop this, one has to work in order to develop purity of mind. And when the mind has virya, sati, and samadhi, then this mind is pure, and this is the immediate benefit that we get from the practice. To get the mind so that it doesn't go anywhere else, we try to observe every rising and every falling again and again. We're trying to collect the mind. But if our practice isn't yet good, then the mind is very difficult to control. And it separates from the object, and then it goes somewhere else. It goes away. So we have to note this, wandering, or thinking, planning. Good or bad, whatever thinking, planning, wandering arises, one has to observe it, note it, and then return to observing the rising and falling. When we sit for a while, in the body, discomfort arises here and there. And there's aches or stiffness or numbness. And these things are really there. So we have to observe them when they arise. And sometimes these become quite strong. And at those times then we have to relax our noting a little bit. Sometimes we are more relaxed with the noting, and then sometimes we can go again to noting with more effort. And if we can't manage to note the pain, then we can just let go of it and return to observing the rising and the falling in order to develop more mental energy and more aiming. And then we return again to the pain, not trying to make it go away, but trying to know it, because this is also true nature, so we have to observe it just in order to know it. In the body, if discomfort arises, as much as possible, one needs to just bear it patiently and not move, as much as one can do this. One shouldn't have doubts that sitting still without changing posture when there's pain will cause some disease. When we reach the stage of being able to overcome Vedana or pain, then we'll challenge it to come. We'll be very courageous in the face of pain. When we're sitting in this way, when we hear a sound and the attention goes to the sound, we should note hearing. Similarly, when we see something in the mind, note seeing. Or when there's smelling, note smelling. When eating and drinking, note tasting. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing. All these need to be observed. And from time to time, when greed or lobha arises, that also needs to be noted. When from time to time there's dissatisfaction or anger, dosa, This also needs to be observed. Whatever arises, the yogi needs to observe it. While we're observing the rising and the falling, when there's other special objects that arise, we let go of the rising and the falling and observe that object. And when it's gone, we return again to the rising and the falling. We shouldn't let the mind be without control. We shouldn't just let it go. There always needs to be some mental control. So this is how to observe while sitting. Other activities such as standing, doing the walking meditation, and other physical actions, the yogis can understand how to observe these. It's outside of the time that we are asleep. We should always be paying attention to what we are doing, to our postures, the four main postures of sitting, standing, lying, walking, sitting, standing, walking, lying down. There's nothing else to observe. So in order not to let yourself be bothered by anything that is happening around you, just pay attention to your own noting. Sometimes people like dogs. They like the dogs, and they feed the dogs because they like the dogs. And then the dogs follow the yogi, and the dogs even come to the dining hall. And if a dog follows a yogi, it means that that yogi is interested in the dog. So don't let yourself do that. Don't let yourself be interested in the dogs. Don't love the dogs, love yourself, and understand what is the way to really show your love for yourself. So please do not let anybody see you with the dogs. Please pay attention to yourself and pay attention to your own noting. Petting the dogs is a big nuisance to the practice. So never before in the history of this monastery has a dog come into the dining hall and climbed up to see the yogis. And the reason why this has happened this year recently is because of people who like dogs. So please be careful and do not let yourself be interested in the dogs. So 1 hour is up, and so that's all for today. Sadhu, 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 sadhu.